What a weekend. So many people have predicted this. We're thrilled that our guests have given us perspective over the last months. And then there's a perspective from Washington. We welcome Greg Valliere of the Potomac Research Group. Good noon to you, Greg.
Great to see you, Tom.
You are now writing about the Netherlands. Why do you care about the Netherlands in Washington?
I think it's part of a very, very big trend. I would argue it's the biggest trend we've seen so far in 2012, and that is the fading, the fall of austerity. In country after country, the voters are rebelling. You see it in the Netherlands. I think you're going to see it in France. You've seen it in Spain, Greece, Italy. And I would argue, Tom, you're seeing it here in Washington. We got unemployment benefits extended, didn't pay for them. We got the payroll tax cut extended, didn't pay for that. The House last week passed a small business tax cut, didn't pay for that. The trend is going global.
Are the Republicans that enjoy discussions of austerity, are they silent? Are they speaking a different tune?
Nobody wants to talk about it in an election year, first of all. But I tell you, Tom, you talk to people on the Hill, and everyone now is trying to figure out how in the world are we going to wiggle out of sequestration at the end of the year. And what that means in plain English is that since the super committee failed to cut the deficit, we're supposed to have big new cuts on defense and discretionary spending next January, and everybody is scheming on how they wiggle out of it.
Right, I want to go to the headlines right now, break this up with Greg Valliere in Washington. Facebook, this is interesting, particularly off my conversation with Rick Sherlin of Nomura. Facebook to, in some way, obtain ownership of 650 AOL patents. That was AOL patents over to Microsoft, and now they go over to Facebook. And this after Rick Sherlin talked about Bing being somehow folded into Facebook. If you need a roadmap for what I just say, I sympathize. Let's go back to the calm and simplicity of Washington. Dreaded first chart. Let's bring it up here right now for young Valliere. American austerity. Okay, and you can see here, folks, government expenditures. Is it safe to say when we see the line go up, Greg, and then go flat, that we actually do have austerity in Washington?
I'd say this, Tom. I think outlays have flattened out. And that's a good story because receipt growth has picked up. So you don't have to have a degree from MIT to realize that the deficit is coming down. I think where you get the rebellion is the idea of deep new cuts next January from sequestration, or the end of the Bush tax cuts in December. Nobody wants that kind of austerity.
Let's bring up the op-ed. Op-ed 3, this is Al Hunt, writing for Bloomberg today. I thought a very, very nice piece, catching me up on the land of Valliere. Obama, Romney need to ignite swing voters' passion. This great quote. Michael Lindsay, president of Gordon College, has studied the evangelical vote, believes this year's Republican nominee can do better than McCain, who he says was religiously unmusical. I love that, Greg. I don't have a strong opinion on this, but you have been courageous and out front in your travels to the Midwest of talking about religion. Is the debate in 2012 like the debate in 1960?
I don't know, because nobody dares to talk about this in public. And frankly, I'm not crazy about talking about it in public either, Tom. But in private, I meet lots of people who are intelligent, reasonable people who will say they have a problem with Romney's religion. I don't. I may have a problem with Romney on other issues, but I could care less what his religion is. But an awful lot of people do. And that, to me, is the sleeper issue. It's the one issue that no one can quite figure out.
And we're all squirming here, folks, because we don't like to talk about this. But the fact is, here it is. Where does the economy fit in right now? Is it in second place, third place, or eighth place, like the Red Sox?
Oh, I'm a Red Sox fan. Good one, Tom. It's first, second, and third. The economy is still first, second, and third. I wouldn't put religion in the top 5. It's out there somewhere in the haze. But it really is the economy. And I tell you, if this new chatter that the economy is starting to soften again becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I thought the New York Times and Wall Street Journal on Friday overstated a possible weakness, but if this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, the economy could go back to being a real big negative for Barack Obama.
I'll have a David Rosenberg quote later in the hour that's very important on that. This chart is a chart we can't forget. When I'm on with Jim Glassman and Bill Gross doing Jobs Day, this is the first number I look at because it just shows a structural pain. Greg, I'm going to say this is the elephant in the Washington room. Median duration of unemployment. You can see the red trend, folks, which goes back 20 years, and we're still barely come in. I mean, it's still about jobs to politicians, isn't it?
It's a very big deal, and I tell you, Tom, the White House about a month ago started sounding a little bit triumphant, like, oh, we've turned the corner, things are great now, the economy has turned around. I'm not so sure about that. There are still an awful lot of people who have been out of work for an extraordinarily long period of time. They don't see the turnaround.
What do you see on the Sunday talk shows? Are they talking about the same thing, Greg, that you and I are talking about? Are they on a different theme, the horse race of it all?
Yeah, and all this stuff, Colombian prostitutes. If I hear one more story about that, I'm going to scream. It's irrelevant, I think, to the real story, and that is, you know, what's going to happen in Washington, what's the Fed going to do next week. There's still some very, very big unresolved issues. And if this wind blowing from Western Europe starts to really infect the U.S., you know, we're not out of the woods yet on the economy, and I think that Ben Bernanke knows it, and it's a major reason why QE3 will stay on the table. Let's
look at one more chart with Greg Valliere, and we'll let him go because he's had way too many charts. This is taxes as a percent of GDP, and you can see the boom out of World War II in taxes, and then we go along, and we've actually rolled over. What does it say about the ability to increase taxes, Greg? Do we have room to increase taxes?
The key here is how many Republicans will defect. When I look at the Paul Ryan plan and Mitt Romney's plan, the numbers don't add up. They can't balance the budget in the next 10 or 15 years unless there's a bigger component from taxes. Deep down in, they know it. The key is how many other Republicans will begin to concede that.